I think there's a difference between somebody's house or somebody's home and somebody's culture. So somebody can live there and that can be considered home to somebody. And nobody is owning land, right? Like nobody actually owns land. Like you can have a paper that says you own land, but that's to what extent? Like we have what created this idea of ownership. Um, but I think a culture, like when people, once we get down to the basic of, and I'm sure we'll get to it later, of like what makes someone Hawaiian? Well, my idea is you're native Hawaiian. Your ancestry is connected to the culture and the kind of the birth of that island or that place.
Right.
And somebody can live there, somebody can inhabit it. So when somebody's saying, I don't know, our land or whatever, like, or our land, like, please don't mess up my favorite beach. Like, it's not my beach, but it's my favorite beach. I don't know. I think
Hmm.
I think it's a matter of semantics and just word usage. Because
Yeah,
when it
for
starts to
sure,
get
for
over
sure.
the top of that, then I think it's important to educate and also inform.
Yeah, For I think sure. it's tricky. I think it gets like Gazer's asking for some examples, and I'm like, dude, it's like it's very much into the context of the situation. Like I know a lot of people that say anything and it doesn't have an effect and it's super okay, and then some people could say something and you're just like, bro, what are you saying? Anyways, yeah, I think in the in the volleyball world, Hawaii has such a larger place in our volleyball world than it does in a lot of other places. Like for example, basketball or um, I mean, in American football, we have a pretty solid place as well. But Hawaii has such a central part of volleyball history in America, I would say. So
Mm.
I feel like I'm running into this more and more and more. And it was something I just felt like I had to just share because um, I don't think that most of the people that I run into don't know that Hawaii has a people like there are native Hawaiians. I don't
Yeah.
think in the first place like people don't really understand that in general, and that's something that is like crazy, but it's not because we're a small place and we have to know like have some humility in the fact that like no, not everyone's supposed to know about our history.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we don't know about theirs, so why would we expect them to know about ours? And so I definitely check myself to that. And when it's like me thinking, oh, you should know that, I definitely don't come from that place. But it's when it's like when I'm feeling a certain type of way and somebody's like, oh, like they say something, I'll just say like, oh yeah, that's not necessarily correct actually. And it just comes with like the labeling of people from Hawaii as Hawaiian, or maybe
That always bugged me.
like there's some other things that stand out and I'm trying to bring them up. What things, if you can think about them, stand out to you that you've run into in life and in the volleyball community as well?
I think a lot of it was um, labeling people from Hawaii as Hawaiian and uh, like just in general, like, oh, the Hawaiian team,
Right.
like at JOs or whatever. And you have to, it was more of like what you said, it's more of I don't expect you. Like some people literally didn't realize that there was electricity on the
Right.
island. And
Right.
I'm not that offended by that. Like, it's just, you just don't know, right?
Right. Right.
To a certain extent, like, if you think I'm stupid, then that's another thing coming. But like, obviously, you see what I'm doing, you see what other people are doing from Hawaii. Let's put two and two together.
Right. Right.
But I think just it's more about education in the fact of like, and informing those that Hawaiian is being native Hawaiian is a culture. It's a cultural identity, and like that we are also an extremely proud people, and so when you don't get that right, and when you don't like, uh, I guess we have respect for it, then that really can rub some people the wrong way. And so that's always bugged me a little bit, but not to the sense of I'm gonna scream at you and blah blah blah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
It's
like
never an anger thing.
it's like
It's just like a little like, and you're just like, damn, like
let me
just a
educate
little
you, but it's at the
yeah.
same time, but it's like how many times I gotta educate you?
Well, it's also crazy. I think you touched it on it. It's like I think there's just such a pride thing. Like I don't know very many cultures that have the like everyone has pride, but man, do we have some pride. And it because and part of this the another slide on that post was like when you label everybody from Hawaii Hawaiians, it erases the actual Hawaiians because then now everyone's Hawaiian. So who are we then?
There's no other way to identify
Exactly, and that's like
a Hawaiian.
right, and that's our strongest identity that we hold. And so when
Yeah.
like it's not like I was raised in Texas and like so you're Texan. It's not like
Yeah,
that
I think
because like
that's
I
the hard
am
part.
yeah, and I'm like guys like because I get it with the Worsleys. Like everyone's like, "Oh, you're with the Hawaii boys?" Like the Hawaiians, and I'm like I always just brush it off. I'm always like, yeah, we're all, you know, just because I don't care. And then if I'm feeling some sort of way one time, like somebody's like, oh, and I'm like, bruh, they're from California, and they're like, oh, oh, well, why are they? And I'm like, yeah, no worries, yeah. And they're like, where are you from? I'm like, I'm from Hawaii, and I'm also Hawaiian.
And I'm also
But like,
exactly.
but I wouldn't like, I don't take it to that level because I'm not that kind of guy.
Yeah,
but like, that's what I'm thinking in my head is like, but like that's, yeah. And I think we like
I
you
have a
nailed
similar
it. We're
experience.
very prideful.
I have a similar experience, but almost like to a harder degree to understand because Shoji brothers, right? It's like, oh,
Right.
you're always, oh, it's the Hawaii boys, it's the Hawaiian, but okay, Hawaii boys, solid, we're good.
Right. Yeah. Hawaii boys for sure.
Oh, the Hawaiian boys, oh, actually, let me help you out there.
Right. Right.
You know,
Right. Right.
like Eric Kavika, born in Hawaii, love Hawaiian culture, respect it, live it. But there is a sense of you don't, that's not part of your blood,
Yeah. Blood.
right?
Right.
And so it's one thing to love and respect Hawaiian culture, which Hawaiian people absolutely love, and that's what Hawaii has become. And that's almost why there's like this morphing
Protection.
mixing of like, but also like are you Hawaiian? Are you not? Like I can't tell, like I have to legitimately ask you
Right. Right. Right.
and
Right.
say what's your genealogy type deal, because
Yeah.
so many people have not adopted Hawaiian culture, or not even Hawaiian culture, but the Hawaii style of living,
Right.
and love it and respect it, and I think that's a wonderful compliment. I think that's an incredible deal, but it also can make it harder to distinguish, who is Native Hawaiian and who is not. And so that's where communication comes in, and that's where education also comes in, because I've been in that similar situation, right, with you and the Worsley brothers, or like me and the Shojis. It's like,
Right. Right.
like we are all from Hawaii, we're all born in Hawaii, but there's a little difference, and it doesn't make me better or worse. That's just
Right.
there's
Right.
just
Right.
difference.
Right.
There's just a difference, and it's a proud culture. And obviously, like coming from, like going to Kamehameha, which is a private school where it's preference to Native Hawaiians, and so 100% of the kids there are Native Hawaiian, have some type of Native Hawaiian. There's so much, and Mike, I know you understand this. Even you went there for what, the sixth grade?
Yeah. Just kindergarten
grade.
6. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, but you understand this, but going there, you have like a sense of unity and a sense of pride, and like you also are educated quite a bit around Hawaiian culture and what it's about. And so there's so much instilled intrinsic pride in that. So when you hear these little things,
Right.
you just,
Right.
it
Right.
just kind of catches you just a little bit.
Totally.
And then
Totally.
and then it's patience, and then it's education and informing and love. but it's always like, let's have that respect and let's have that, um, recognition for a culture. Because what do you call everybody from Samoa or that lives in Samoa Samoans? No, you're respected as a culture because some Samoa Joe, the wrestler or whatever, was like super popular, and you're like, oh, that's a culture. And so that's, even when I come over here overseas, they're like, oh, you're from Hawaii, and I'm like, yeah, I'm Hawaiian, and there's a language, and I'm like, what?
Yeah,
There's
no
a
chance they would
language?
know that. No chance they would know
And they're
that.
like, what are you talking about? Like Samoan? Like you're Samoan? And I was like, no, like I'm Hawaiian. It's a
But then you got to teach
different
the Polynesian
part of
triangle, and then
the
you're like,
triangle.
so then you're
Oh
like,
God.
you guys like, you know how you guys are like European, like it's kind of like a family.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
we
yeah.
have kind of a similar thing with Polynesian,
No.
and so
I had
we are like cousins in a way.
yeah. And the
Like you
languages
guys
are
are
similar.
European, and our language, we are all of similar genealogy. But when you guys like moved like around in Europe, we moved around in the islands.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we have
And so
Samoa, and we can like basically for people, there's a triangle that's make believe in the Pacific Ocean with New Zealand, Rapa Nui, and Hawaii
Papua
are
New
kind of
Guinea.
the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
triangle, and then inside of it is Polynesia, which is
Yeah.
Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, Tahiti, a lot of other
Yeah.
islands. And Hawaii is the top of that triangle, and that is kind of like, in a sense, African or Asian or European. There's also Polynesian,
Polynesian.
and that's kind of our grouping. But that is like never ever gonna be known to really anyone besides people within it. I had a story that I told at UCLA where we had a lot of African American kids on our team, and I was always hanging out with them. And I went and like jumped into this dance battle and was like dance battling, and then I came back and a friend of mine had another friend there who was in like this African American club I was hanging out with, and she's like, "Man, look at this like white privilege, this white boy." And my
Oh, I
teammate
hate that.
and my teammate had known, they know who I am, and they've seen
Hmm.
my family, where I come from, and so they have a different understanding of me than this woman. And so he's like, "Bro, do you know, like, what do you think this guy's not the guy you want to like mess with this?" And he's like, "What do you think this guy is?" She's like, "White." And he's like, "What else?" And she went through every single ethnicity, like every time. And she was like, "You're
Yeah.
lying. You're lying. Like, what is it? You're lying." And I'm like, and I was like, that's when you know you're a minority. When like you couldn't guess my ethnicity and you're telling me I'm lying because in your mind, there's no possible other ethnicity I could be. And I'm Hawaiian. And she's like, "Hawaiian? Like, what is?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's all good. Don't worry, it's all good." But that's like
I
a
think
story of
that's
just
what
like
can be a
that
turn
sums
off.
up what we go through a little bit.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I strive not to do as well, right? It's look at you, like you don't know nothing about
Right.
our culture and this and that. Like you should be more educated, this and that. I'm like,
Yeah,
look,
I
I
don't want
don't
to take
expect
that.
you to,
Right.
and I don't. I'm gonna give you the benefit of the doubt, but I'm gonna teach you it once.
Well, even like,
Don't make
dude,
the mistake twice.
that's even like the most I've ever had to like, and I even was like telling it to her politely. I'm like, "Hey, like, that's when you know it's," and I said it like jokingly, but like, I get we're the smallest, like, nobody should know. I get that. Like, why are you gonna know about Hawaii if you're from Kentucky? Like, they're not gonna teach you about it. Like, we're
Yeah, yeah,
tiny.
yeah.
And I'm not gonna expect anyone to know about it.
No,
So there's also
but
that.
just so that people understand, there is a long culture and history associated with Hawaii and associated with Hawaii in the United States as well.
Hmm.
And a lot of dismay and a lot of wrongdoing had been done towards Hawaiian culture, and so that is where some of that pride, but also some of that disdain can come from. And so a lot of what's preached in Hawaii, in my experience, is one of the biggest things is respect. And you're taught to respect elders, you're taught to respect your peers, you're taught to respect the land and the sea and everything that around you. And not most of all, but especially cultures. Like you grow up just surrounded by people with different backgrounds and ethnicities, and everybody knows them. It's hilarious because growing up in Hawaii, it's like, oh, I'm 1/32 Irish, 1/16 German, and everybody rattles it off.
Yeah. Everybody knows them.
2.5%. And then you come to California or whatever, I come to school, I'm like, what are you? Well, I'm like German, Swiss. I'm like, how much? I don't know. And so
that's so true. That's such a Hawaii culture thing.
It's a Hawaii thing that you know, when you know you're from Hawaii, like those kind of like memes or whatever.
Right.
I think respect is a huge deal in Hawaii. And so whether it be cultures, whether it be all of these things. And so when that sometimes isn't reciprocated, that can be taken in a certain type of way that is not as friendly. But it's also our job to be respectful and say, look, I don't necessarily expect you to know everything, but let's respect the culture and respect where the history and all of the things that this Hawaiian people have been through and are going to do, honestly.
The last part of this, because I just remembered this. Eric just, like last week, had sent me a TikTok of a college. Did he send this to you? The college doing the Hawaii night. And it was just like grass skirts and like coconut bras, and like they're dancing to, I don't know, some Lilo and Stitch song and something like that. And he sent it to me and he's like, bro, is this like, I'm like, dude, because he remembered I had posted something about the AVP had done something like this where they invite someone in from the crowd and like put on like grass skirt and whatever, the stereotypical hula. Yeah. I don't even know where it comes from, but and then they like dance hula in front of the whole crowd, and then people like laugh and like vote for the funniest one. And I was like, just imagine, like, Eric, just imagine if they were to put on an African headdress and dress as an African and do like a tribe dance in front of everyone, and everyone's laughing and voting for like the funniest one. How like do you think? I think the AVP would be shut down as a company. Like that would be done. And like this school, the coach would be fired if she had their women's volleyball team dancing in African tribe clothing and like dancing around like what they think an African dance would look like. It'd be over. And at UCLA, we had a Hawaii night for the men's basketball. It was just like so ridiculous. It was like, I've never seen something this bad. And I was just like, how are they getting away with this? Like, I'm not going to say anything because I'm not that guy, but I'm just like, in my head, I'm just like, dude. And you guys are over here like canceling, like getting people fired for like the most minor comment on, I don't know, whatever politics there is. And we're like doing this and there's like 10,000 people in attendance and like nobody's going to bat an eye at this.
Yeah. So I think it's context. Yeah. It's just, it's context is different in every situation right now. That particular political climate is like super hot, right? And so there's like these little triggers, bro. You flip that switch, gone. Yeah. No coming back from it. Yeah. Even if you flip that switch 10 to 12 years ago on Twitter.
Yeah, they'll find you.
They'll find you. So I think it's just different, you know, like even in Hawaii, we have luau's that perpetuate that as well, right? You know, with tourists and this and that. And
shout out Tui Leto. Go see him. Go see our good friend Tui Leto.
Go see him, aka the Cookie Man. But no, but anyway, it's contextual. So like obviously tourism is such a huge economic thing in Hawaii that's not a necessity, but it's a thing that people do to make it and get by. And so, you know, to each their own, but there's a level of respect that I think everybody should give.